The soft morning light filtered through the living room curtains, creating a peaceful atmosphere that contrasted with the turmoil that was forming inside me. I was sitting at my office desk, with a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and the other flipping through the papers Sarah asked me to organize. It was an ordinary day, or at least it should have been. The familiar routine comforted me, but an unsettling feeling began to invade me. While analyzing the documents, a small envelope caught my attention. It was partially hidden under a stack of papers. With an almost involuntary impulse, I pulled him closer. DNA exam was written on the outside in big letters. My heart raced. Why would Sarah have a DNA test stored here? A wave of anxiety ran through me, but curiosity was stronger. I opened the envelope and removed the paper. The words jumped out at me, as if they were screaming for the truth. Paternity test, negative result. The world around me fell apart in a split second. I stared at the paper, my eyes blurry. The children that I loved, that I raised and that I believed were mine, were not mine. Reality hit me like a punch in the stomach. I was overcome by a mixture of anger and confusion. How could Sarah hide this from me? A whirlwind of questions appeared in my mind. I stood up abruptly, the chair creaking under the weight of my decision. I needed to confront her. I could no longer live in a lie. I walked to the bedroom, where Sarah was, apparently calm, organizing the toys spread across the floor. The sun illuminated her face, and for a moment, I thought about how happy she looked. But that image was quickly replaced by the pain I felt. Sarah, my voice came out louder than I intended. She turned around, surprised. What is it, Nathan? He asked, with a smile that soon disappeared when he saw the expression on my face. We need to talk. Now. She hesitated, but when she saw the seriousness in my eyes, she nodded and followed me into the living room. I closed the door firmly, as if the act itself could lock away what was about to be revealed. I found this, he said, holding the DNA test toward him. What does that mean? Sarah's countenance changed instantly. The color in her face faded, and I could see the internal struggle she was facing. Nathan, I can explain, he began, but I didn't want to hear any excuses. Explain? How can you explain that my children are not mine? Anger burned in me, and pain mingled with it. Please listen to me, she begged, her eyes filling with tears. It was a mistake, an impulsive decision. I never wanted you to find out like this. An error? Sarah, this is not a mistake. This is treason. The word came out with contempt, as if I were spitting venom. Who is the father? She hesitated, and the silence that followed was deafening. Finally, she murmured, Mark. He is the father. Her name fell like a bomb among us. Mark. Sarah's ex-boyfriend. I remember how she spoke of him with a nostalgic tone, as if he were an unfinished chapter in her life. Did you have a relationship with him while we were married? I asked, voice shaking with anger. That's not how I wanted things to happen. Sarah started to cry, but there was no room for compassion at that moment. The pain was deep, and I needed answers. I will find out the truth, Sarah. I'm not going to leave it like that. I left her there, surrounded by silence, as each word came out of me like it was emptying an unbearable weight. The trust one had in her, in our relationship, was crumbling into 1,000 pieces. The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation of what was to come. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my courage. The meeting had been scheduled for days, but with each minute that approached, the weight of the truth seemed to increase. I looked out the window, the cloudy sky reflecting my inner turmoil. It was time to face Sarah, to expose everything I had discovered about her betrayals and lies. When she walked in, with that smile that used to comfort me, my heart sank. It was hard to believe that the woman I loved could have deceived me so profoundly. Nathan, are you okay? She asked, the concern in her voice seemed genuine, but I knew it was all a facade. "We need to talk, Sarah. About DNA tests." The firmness of my voice surprised even myself. Her smile fell instantly, and I could see a flash of fear in her eyes. "You know what I'm talking about." She hesitated, her expression changing from surprise to despair. "Nathan, please don't." "Know what?" "Don't tell me the truth." I couldn't contain the anger that boiled inside me. "Our children, Sarah. They are not mine." The words hung in the air, like a slowly spreading poison. Sarah sat up, the color draining from her face. I did it out of love, Nathan. I thought you would never need to know." His voice was cracking, and I could see his hands shaking. "For love. You destroyed everything. How can you?" The frustration turned into a scream. "And now, you want me to believe that this ex-boyfriend of yours, Mark, is the solution? That he can help raise our children?" She looked lost, tears were streaming down her face. "Nathan, I never wanted this to happen. I just wish they had a father. And Mark, he's always been a part of my life. He returned to the city and, which is. Do you want me to accept this? For him to become the father I never was?" I was furious, every word was like a knife. "You cheated on me and you're trying to make me feel guilty about it. That's not how I see it. I just wanted them to have a stable home." Her voice was full of despair. "I didn't want you to find out that way. And what do you think I should do now? Smile and accept?" "I'm going to the police, Sarah. This is fraud. You need to face the consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. I knew I was making a drastic decision, but the pain was unbearable. "You cannot do that. They're children, Nathan. They are not to blame for anything." The desperation in her voice was palpable, and I felt torn, but the truth was that the betrayal had broken something inside me that might never be repaired. "And you think I can just ignore what you did? As if nothing had happened?" My voice was calmer, but the intensity of the situation weighed on every word. "You need to understand that I cannot allow this to continue. They need a safe and true home. Please, do not do that. I am their mother." Sarah's tone was now pleading, and I could see she was on the verge of breaking down. "You can't take me away from them. I'm all they have. And you think I'm nothing? What am I to them then? A stranger?" The pain in my voice hit her hard. Her tears were increasing, and I realized there was something deeper in her expression. "I just wanted to protect the boys. You do not understand." She stood up, her voice shaking. "Mark can help, I just need time. Time. Time to make more lies." "No, Sarah, that's over. I can't live like this anymore." The decision was made, and I knew there was no going back. As she walked away, I realized that my heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. The fight for the truth was just beginning, and in the midst of the chaos, I needed to find a way to protect my children. The weight of the decision I made was still suffocating me when I entered the courtroom. The feeling that what was about to happen would change my life forever was almost palpable. The room was full, friends, family and, of course, lawyers. All eyes turned to me as I made my way to the plaintiff's bench. Sarah was on the other side, looking small and desolate, like a shadow of her former self. The smell of formality and tension hung in the air, and with every step I took, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. "Are you ready for this, Nathan?" The lawyer questioned me in a whisper, but I couldn't answer. The lump in my throat was like a lead weight. I knew I had to fight, but what I really wanted was to protect my children. "It's okay," I thought. "I'll do what's best for them." The judge entered and, with that, a respectful silence took over the room. The hearing began, and the words began to flow, but my mind was far away. I watched the prosecution lawyer lay out the details of the case, talking about Sarah's betrayal, about how she had deceived not just me, but everyone who loved the children. Every word felt like a blow to my heart. I looked at the faces of the people present, trying to find a sign of support, but everyone looked as lost as I felt. "I demand custody of the children," my lawyer proclaimed, and the words echoed in my mind. Custody. It was a term that carried enormous weight. How could I ensure they were safe? Sarah looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and despair. "Nathan, you don't have to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but the intensity of the situation didn't let me hear any sign of sincerity. The defense attorney began to present his case, talking about the life we built together, the happiness the children brought. He tried to paint a picture of a loving home, but I knew the truth was much more complicated. I remembered laughter, family moments, but also the betrayal that dismantled everything. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up and walked to the center of the room, feeling the heavy eyes on me. "I love my children," I began, my voice steady but my heart racing. "They are everything to me, and I just want to protect them. The truth is, I never imagined I would be here, fighting their mother." The room was completely silent, and I could feel the tension in the walls. "Did you know they weren't yours?" Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. "You don't love me anymore, Nathan. You love the idea of being a father, but not what we actually are." Her words stung like stabs. I knew she was trying to provoke me, but I couldn't let her win. "It's not about you, Sarah," I replied, trying to remain calm. "It's about them. And even though you deceived me, I can't let them learn about this truth in such a cruel way." There were tears in my eyes, and I could tell the room was divided. Some seemed supportive, while others were clearly on Sarah's side. The hearing continued, and each testimony seemed to deepen the wound even further. The children were at home, oblivious to all of this, and the idea that they could feel the pain of separation tormented me. I needed to be strong for them, even if it meant facing Sarah and her entire past. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, the judge retired to deliberate. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at Sarah, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had loved. Her fragility, her pain, all of this made me question whether there was any possibility of redemption. But soon anger took over again. I had to be strong, I couldn't give in now. The children needed me. The silence in the house was deafening. The laughter and jokes that used to echo through the halls were now just distant echoes, drowned out by pain and confusion. While taking care of the children, I tried to maintain a routine, but sadness hung in the air like a shadow. I looked at their faces, so innocent, so vulnerable. Mario, my eldest son, seemed quieter than usual, and Clara, my youngest, was often lost in thought, her eyes reflecting a sea of emotions that I couldn't understand. I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered toys, and pulled Mario closer to me. "Mario, are you okay?" I asked, stroking his hair. He looked at me with those big, sad eyes, and my throat tightened. "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy come home?" The question was like a knife, cutting deep. I wanted so badly to have an answer that could comfort him, but the truth was that I was lost myself. She's going through a difficult time, son. But we're together, right? Let's take care of each other. I tried to smile, but I couldn't hide the sadness that consumed me. The answer brought him no comfort, and the silence that followed was heavy. It was then that I decided that I needed to see Sarah, I needed to understand what had happened between us. With my heart racing and a mixture of anger and love, I headed towards the prison. The visit was a painful step, and each kilometer I covered took me to a labyrinth of memories and emotions. Upon arrival, I was taken to a cold room, with bare walls and a metal table. I was nervous, stomach churning, when I saw Sarah enter. The orange uniform didn't suit him well, she seemed like a shadow of the woman I loved. Her eyes, once vibrant and full of life, were now dull, as if the light had been taken from her. "Nathan," she started, but I interrupted her. You betrayed me, Sarah. How could you do this to both of us? With the children? Anger boiled inside me, and at the same time, there was a deep pain that I couldn't ignore. I know, but I didn't want that to happen. I loved you, Nathan. I still do, she said, her voice breaking. It happened, and I didn't know how to deal with it. How could you hide this from me? I thought we were family, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. How could you put all of this at risk? I was afraid. Fear of losing everything. I thought I could work it out. I thought everything would be okay, she replied, tears streaming down her face. And now? What do you expect? May I forgive and everything go back to the way it was before? I asked, trying to maintain my composure, but the truth was I was so confused. Part of me wanted to hug her, comfort her, but another part was angry. No, Nathan. I just wanted you to know that I never wanted things to come to this. I just want our kids to be okay, she said, looking into my eyes. And you think this is what they need? A mother in prison? The desperation in my voice was palpable. Mark is back, Sarah. He wants to get closer to the children. What do you expect me to do with this? Mark, he just wants to help. He might be a good influence, and I know this might sound weird, but you're still their father. I don't want you to lose them. His voice was filled with an urgency that I couldn't ignore. Those words hit me like a wave. I was their father, and even with everything that happened, I wanted to protect them. But how? The tumultuous feelings inside me struggled between love and betrayal. The conversation that should have been about our children turned into an emotional battlefield. I need to go, I said, rising from the chair. I need to take care of them. And I don't know if I can continue this conversation now. Please, Nathan, she begged, but I was already moving away, feeling the weight of the decisions I would need to make. Every step I took towards the exit was a reminder that the life I knew had disintegrated, and the only certainty that remained was the love I felt for the children. The courtroom was packed, and I could feel the tension in the air. It was as if every person present was holding their breath, waiting for what I would have to say. Sarah was there, looking lost, a shadow of the woman I knew. The pain and betrayal still burned inside me, but at that moment, what worried me were the children. They were innocent in this whirlwind of emotions and wrong decisions. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a steady gaze, called me to the stand. I stood up, swallowing hard, and walked to the witness stand. Sarah's eyes were fixed on me, filled with a mix of despair and hope. She was trying to shift the blame onto me, as if I were responsible for everything that had happened. Mr. Nathan, can you tell us what occurred between you and Miss Sarah? The judge asked, and I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I discovered that my children are not biologically mine, I began, voice shaking. I found a DNA test that proved this. And from there, I started investigating Sarah's past. Were you aware that she may have had a relationship with another man? The judge insisted. No, I didn't know, I replied, feeling the anger rising. She deceived me, and I feel betrayed. But what hurts me most is thinking that the children, who I love deeply, are in the middle of all this. At that moment, Sarah raised her hand, interrupting. Nathan, please, you don't understand. I did it out of love. I didn't want to hurt you. His voice was a mix of desperation and regret, but I wasn't willing to fall into his emotional trap. You didn't do it out of love, Sarah. You did it out of selfishness, I retorted, feeling tears welling in my eyes. Children deserve to know the truth, and they deserve a home that isn't built on lies. The judge gestured for Sarah to shut up, and I continued. Sarah had a relationship with an ex-boyfriend during our marriage. She cheated on me, and now she is trying to manipulate the situation to make herself look like the victim. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and I saw the desperation in Sarah's eyes. But instead of feeling satisfaction, my heart sank. I didn't want to see the woman I loved sink even further. When I finished my statement, I sat down in the chair, exhausted. Sarah's lawyer began questioning. He was cunning and didn't hesitate to use the weaknesses in my story. "Nathan, do you really believe that children don't love you for who you are, regardless of biology?" "This has nothing to do with love," I replied, trying to remain calm. "They are my children, and I love them. But the truth needs to come out. They need to know who they are." The lawyer continued to press, and each question seemed to open a wound that I was trying to heal. He brought to light details of Sarah's past, revealing that she had suffered abuse as a child, which led her to make disastrous decisions in her adult life. The room fell silent, and I realized that as hurt as I was, Sarah was also a victim of her own circumstances. "Do you still love her?" the lawyer asked, and for a moment I hesitated. I remembered the good times, the laughs, the promises. I don't know," I mumbled, voice cracking. "I loved her once, but now I feel like this woman here is no longer the same." The judge looked at me, and I could see that she was assessing the situation. I was torn between the desire to protect the children and the love I somehow still had left for Sarah. A love that was tainted by betrayal, but still existed. By the end of the day, my head was confused. The struggle between reason and emotion was consuming me. As I walked out of the courtroom, I realized I needed to make a decision that would impact not only my life, but the lives of the children I loved so much. And, above all, I needed to decide what was really best for them. The day of sentencing arrived, and the air in the courtroom was thick with tension. I felt like I was about to face judgment not just for my actions, but for my entire life. The voices around me became an indistinct noise as I became lost in my thoughts, trying to imagine what the future would hold for me and the children. The judge entered, and everyone stood up. I sat up again, my heart racing, eyes fixed on Sarah, who sat in handcuffs. Her expression was a mix of despair and anger, and I couldn't understand how it had all gotten to this point. While the defense and prosecution argued, my gaze shifted to my children, who were in the room, accompanied by a social worker. They seemed confused, innocent in the midst of this storm that I myself had helped create. The weight of guilt crushed me. I was trying to do what was right, but what was actually right? What should I do? It was then that the silence in the room was broken by a man who entered abruptly, a lawyer who looked like he had come out of a thriller film. He introduced himself as Dr. Alex, a family law specialist. "I have evidence that would change everything in this case," he said, his voice firm and full of authority. The murmur that followed was deafening. The judge asked for calm, but I could barely hear the words. My heart was in my mouth. "Evidences? What evidence?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity and fear. The lawyer turned to me and, before I could respond, he began to expound on a story that seemed straight out of a nightmare. He explained that there had been a medical error during the IVF process that Sarah and I had undergone. "The children you believe to be Sarah's are, in fact, also yours. A mistake in the identity of the embryos." His words resonated in the room like an echo of fate. I felt as if the ground had collapsed beneath my feet. The revelation hit me like lightning. My children. Not just Sarah's children, but mine as well. How could I have believed they weren't part of me? What did this mean for everything I had done? My search for justice now felt like a dark and confusing maze. "Your Excellency, I ask that this information be taken into consideration for the verdict," continued Dr. Alex, addressing the judge. I looked at Sarah, who now seemed paralyzed. Anger had given way to disbelief. She didn't know how to react. "Nathan, this can't be true," she murmured, her voice shaky and full of despair. "You know I never wanted this to happen. But it happened, Sarah. You tricked me, and that doesn't change the fact that I love these kids." I retorted, frustration boiling over. The room became chaos, and I realized that the judge was trying, in vain, to restore order. The mysterious lawyer presented documents and reports, and everything became more intense. The truth I had sought turned into a web of lies and secrets. And as reality unfolded, I realized that Sarah, when arrested, had made a deal with Mark, her ex-boyfriend. He was seeking full custody, and I felt powerless over the situation. It didn't matter how much I fought, destiny seemed to have other plans. There I was, at the center of a conflict that seemed to have no end, surrounded by people I loved but who were now far away. What could I do? How can I protect the children, who were, in fact, my children, amidst this tangle of betrayals and dark agreements? I can't lose them, I can't, I thought, as reality descended on me like a storm. A deep pain settled in my chest, and I realized that, in the end, we were all losing what we loved most. The courtroom, which was supposed to be a place of justice, had become an arena of sadness and despair.